Sheila, so great to have you on the podcast here today. How are you?
Great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to kick off this conversation. Why don't we first start, in case there's some people in the audience that haven't met you before, tell
I'm
us a little bit
sure
about
that's
your background.
I guess the most salient thing about me is that I grew up in an enterprise software company. So my parents had one out of our house. They started it when I was 8 years old. And so from there, I've had kind of both every job at an enterprise software company, as well as the capability to just see a startup from beginning to end. As I grew up with the company, and had a an immigrant Indian father, and so if you wanted to live there, you had to work there. And so I have literally worked in enterprise software for very, very many decades. And it's interesting. I know it very deeply. I don't know a ton of things very deeply, but I know enterprise software inside and out, and I'm enjoying the kind of the evolutions that it gives us, right? Like from the cloud wave into this AI wave. It's super fun because you just keep getting the newness of what enterprise software has to offer.
Before we go into anything else, I have to unpack some things here because this is super interesting. Uh, what was the worst, basically, role job that you had to do growing up with this? And then what was the best?
Okay, the worst one was by a country mile, licking the envelopes that we would mail out to potential customers. And one of the great tech innovations of my life was one of those little tubes of water with the sponge on the end that I could replace my own tongue with. So that was a real game changer in my life. And from a best perspective, it was coding and learning to code and being able to actually see my code turn into product that shipped to customers, and just the magic of what software does. It's the right once, run everywhere. And even as a kid, being able to see that and see that in a real way, and then see the teaming that goes into software businesses. I mean, just an incredible amount of people came together to make these companies successful. And my love for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is so deep because I went through that with my parents. I experienced it growing up, and it's just something I take very, very seriously. Like every relationship that we get into with a portfolio company, that is a sacred relationship for me.
I love that. That's a very unique story too. I mean, you were born into this, right? Like it was entrepreneurship. It was building companies at an early age. The stamp thing. The crazy thing about stamps, no matter how long ago it was since someone's licked a stamp, you can still have that taste in your mouth and that
Yes.
awful feeling. It's pretty interesting. Uh, well, let's go through. Let's fast forward to today. Talk us through. Again, if there's people in the audience that are just getting to know you for the first time, talk us through Tola Capital, the focus, any type of overview you want to give us, and then we'll go into some questions.
Sure. We're enterprise software investors. And right now, what that means is we only do enterprise software AI. And when you think about our differentiation, the whole team has operational backgrounds in software. So has run software businesses, has worked in different functional areas of software. And we're a collection of people that are former operators making decisions around where we think the world is going. So we spend a lot of time building out hypotheses on what will happen from a future looking perspective, testing those with different enterprises, spending time with potential customers, thought leaders in the space, academics more and more, frankly, to see where we think the world is going. And then as we see those solutions evolve in the form of entrepreneurs that are excited and energized around different spaces, we come to the table with some knowledge and some intelligence. So I think that hey, I'm a blank slate on this, try to teach me robotics in one meeting, is a difficult path from, at least from my perspective, the way I think about investing, trying to come in as somewhat of a knowledgeable person, obviously not as knowledgeable as the entrepreneur, but that's the focus of our team, saying, hey, we understand where you're coming from. We share an interest in something, right? When we're talking to a company, usually it's because we actually are very interested in the space that they're working in. And then second to that, if we do, both sides want to go forward to invest, we work with them. We will do whatever is required. Everyone says, okay, well, what is, what do you do at this stage, this stage, this stage? Everything is custom. We're not a volume shop, right? We're doing a number of deals where we can be very hands-on with those businesses. And it's us and then a team of advisors around us, at least 50 people that we keep we're super experts in software that we can deploy into different scenarios with our portfolio companies.
Now, you've seen lots of decks. You've talked with many founders, right? As it relates to AI, where have you seen some of the slip ups? Like, you don't have to call out, obviously, we don't want you calling out anyone, but and just from like a deck perspective in explaining maybe the technology in a certain way. Think through it for a second. I don't want you to offend anyone either, but be as real as you can.
Yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, what's the most important model that all these companies have, right? Is it Claude? Is it Llama? Is it O1? No, it's the business model. And so being able to understand their P&L and the implications of those P&Ls. Software businesses are absolutely magic, right? When they work. I think a lot of people come to the table and they don't actually understand what they're building in terms of a P&L longer term. Obviously, we want people to invest for growth and we want all of those elements, but how do you actually build a multi-billion-dollar business that has sustainability, that has legs, that has incredible growth in it, that's delivering a great solution to customers that customers will pay you money for? And so there's implications within that P&L around, hey, how do I think about the cost of goods sold now? As software people, we were never trained in that, right? It wasn't a thing. It wasn't even a line item anyone would ever read, essentially. And so what is the underlying economics of what we're building? What is the moat around it, right? What is the relationship of my product to all of these mega cap businesses out there? Is that something that they're just inclined to just sort of mow over with another product, or make a part of a larger offering and essentially be giving that product away? How do I have staying power? How do I have uniqueness in my team, in my data, in my solution, in the way that I'm solving this for customers? And how do I stay ahead everyone else in this? And so there's a number of elements that I think come together to say, wow, this could be a big business, right? Those are the businesses that we're looking for. Ambitious entrepreneurs who are solving real problems, who say, gosh, I'm in this because I'm just deeply and profoundly driven to make this exist in the world. And I'm sticking with it to make it a huge business.
Now, with how AI has evolved, has that changed how you look at these companies? Like, in the past when you were looking at, like, let's look at it from a scaling perspective.
Right.
Typically enterprise SaaS was really they would throw a lot of bodies at growth. Has that changed? Like, does that worry you now if you see too many people in kind of these financial plans? Are you expecting a much smaller number and more productivity now as a result? Like, just talk us through kind of your mindset in scaling now with how quickly AI has evolved to this point.
I'd say we were always fans of efficient growth. Growth first, but efficient growth, efficient growth, right? In the sense of, you don't get a prize for saying, hey, I spent $6 to get this $1 of revenue, right? I mean, it's not that impressive. And so how are you building something where we're investing for that growth, and we're bringing these solutions to market, but we're doing so in a way that over time we have a real business model. We have a proper P&L that actually does make money. Now, when we think about the scaling elements kind of AI businesses, first of all of the, it's been a quiet week for AI, but all of the conversations that we're having about efficiency and all of these elements of being able to have efficiency at the different layers of training and inference and everything else, that's great for startups. So this is all wildly net positive for the AI ecosystem as a whole. And so when you think about it, there's so many elements of these businesses that are getting more efficient over time. So there's an efficiency of coding right now. There's an efficiency of how these of the infrastructure underneath us, right? One of my favorite portfolio companies is a company called Pulumi that's driving that infrastructure as code. And a ton of our portfolio companies are customers of them because they love the way it helps them scale. And they do that in a natural language way. Like they were very early to say, hey, talk in natural language to all of your infrastructure. And at first, people thought that was really awkward. And then people thought that was absolutely incredible. And so the ability to say, hey, there's economics of all of these elements of change, from coding, from infrastructure, each of these layers that make us more efficient businesses. Now, when you think about scaling on the go-to-market front, right, we're seeing incredible results in sort of how you do AI-enabled marketing, AI-enabled sales. One of our companies, Nooks, is taking the seller and AI enabling, just giving them absolute rock star wings, right? And so sellers enjoy their job more when they use Nooks, but they're also wildly more productive. And so if at each layer you're getting some points of productivity, then you have a really interesting business. Now, then you sort of take that and you look at that in the context of the more macro environment of what we're seeing from a TAM perspective. So software TAMs, when I was at Microsoft, we used to sit there and diagram the IT wallet, and every inch of it and every little element and every penny, was watched. But when you think about TAMs today, these TAMs are much larger. And the TAMs that the agentic world is entering into are the TAMs of the labor pool. And so when I think about security, I'm not just thinking about, okay, what security software spend? Well, actually, that's a really interesting TAM. But on top of that, I'm also thinking about, what do we actually spend on all of the people that do all of the security work for and with us? Well, that's a much bigger TAM. And we just did an investment in a company that's giving you, which is another thing I'm seeing kind of widely across the board. They're giving you a security coworker, right? So this AI coworker is coming onto the team. And at first we thought there would be trepidation about how the people in the SOC, people in the Security Operations Center would work with these AI coworkers. But it turns out they always have more work than they can do. There's always an absolute dearth of time and talent to take on and really evaluate all of the security threats facing their enterprise. They're in love with their AI coworkers, right? They're like, okay, take all of this work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never complain, and do all the work that actually I think is important for the business, but is dry and is dull for humans. And also we don't have the time to do. And so when you think about the business model of these things and these just massive TAMs and the ability to change, right? The agentic world gives you that ability to change these businesses in exponential ways, because we're optimizing what we're seeing from a revenue perspective while we're reducing costs in the business. That it's a pretty cool time.
It's so interesting though. Like when we look back, like think back several years ago, when you would mentor certain companies or give them advice, there'd be certain playbooks they could look towards, right? And some of those playbooks still have a role, but we kind of threw out the old playbooks because things have been reinvented in a sense, right? Like you could look at the Uber model in the past and say, oh, how do we implement? But now you're like, well, wait a second. What would Uber have done differently if AI was, where it is today? So it's interesting.
Look, by the way, I super agree with you on that point. New playbooks, rewriting how society works. You have to take that very seriously, be very careful about that, invest in things like explainability and eval and good reward systems for AI, because we want to understand what's happening in these underlying models. But actually, yeah, I think the companies that are going to do the best are the ones that are going to provide incredible value while they throw away the playbook, but they're doing that with, deep and profound ethics around what they're doing, transparency around what they're doing, but putting the actual customer problem in the center, the business problem in the center of how they're solving this, and then bringing humans around that in different interfaces, whether that's a voice interface, right? We're launching a company today that has an incredible voice interface, whether that's a co-pilot interface for part of the work. And then for another part of the work, that's an agentic interface. That's kind of a press the button, let you run the work. But then I want to be able to double click and check and see what happened there later. And so I do think that we are we're in an uncharted territory, and we should take that seriously from a company perspective. We should also take that very, very seriously from a societal perspective.
I read something the other day. This won't be the case for we're still going to need developers, right? They're not going away. their productivity is going to go up as a result, right, of all
Yeah.
these coding co-pilots and things like that. But it was basically like in some industries, your developers are going to be more like HR for what the models are doing to make sure everything is, compliant. It'll be kind of interesting to see how that all plays out. But
Yeah,
um,
we were talking yesterday with one of our companies, Mark Belmore, who's like he's one of the fathers of reinforcement learning. And we were discussing that, this whole job that everybody was kind of crazy about for a little while of prompt engineer should actually now be reward engineer, right? How do you tune and train models using rewards? And there's a great book. It's a couple years old now, but it's fantastic. The alignment problem, right? By Brian Christensen, around how do you actually create rewards for what you want. And the book is so fun because he takes a bunch of computer scientists, but he also takes a bunch of examples with like babies and kids and gives them weird rewards for different things. And you see just the absolute obsession of these models to win, to win, to win. And, whatever the reward system is. And I think that we're starting to see that's a very new and important area for us to invest in. But I agree with you. I think developers are going to be around. I think there will be a massive overhaul, though, of how we make applications. Like one of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about is what I call we're probably better branding, but the disposable, composable app world, right? So applications now we can create on the fly, right? And if you and I are doing the same business function, we actually may want to do that in a natural language interface in completely different ways, just because our brains work in different ways, even though we're trying to get to the same answer. And historically, we were carbon cut into a specific application, and we all said, okay, well, we're system of record and we're workflow. And now we're not. We're breaking that completely open. And so what we need for that is to say, okay, what is the data tier that supports this flexibility and interface from an application perspective to be able to, do ontologies on the fly, to be able to protect the data, but allow us to use it in a, spin up fashion. And it's one of the biggest shifts I think we'll see from an IT perspective, because our budgets were custom apps and packaged apps, right? And then we went into this SaaS world more aggressively. But that is all changing completely in the disposable, composable app paradigm shift. And so that I'm super, super excited about. That paired with more efficiency at training and at inference, we are going to see an absolute blossoming of the application layer. Just an incredible, incredible renaissance there.
I'll just add, I chatted the other day with a fintech company that works with a lot of CFOs, and we had a kind of an interesting conversation around, startups are going to have to do a better job with, as we kind of shift from kind of just pure subscription to like almost like success based, and tier, like some sort of tier system. I know we already had that in the past, but better job of like calculators, understand, because it's kind of you always heard the old horror stories with cloud, like when cloud was early, right? Like your bill could just be, you didn't even know what it was going to be. So I know that is something from the conversations I've had that CFOs have top of mind too, is how do I even budget for this if we don't know, where we're going to go with it. But in many cases, it should be less, right? Like for certain, if a role is getting, because you were talking about like the TAM earlier, right?
Yep,
If a role is either getting
it together. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And Carrie, I know you were going to say something, so
No, it's okay. Go
off
ahead.
to you. No, that was it. That was my thought on it. I was just wanted to put it out there.
I think that's absolutely right. I think as we sort of look at the evolution of these business models, you're looking at, okay, what is the underlying logical unit? Maybe that logical unit has more of a performance element, number of claims reviewed, anything from an insurance company. And so you need the both capability to do that. Simulation is coming into enterprise software in a big way. One of the things we're playing with a number of our companies is how do you simulate one of our business processes so we can get a sense of what the overall cost will be to run these models. Because I think you're 100% correct. CFOs do not love surprises. My team at Microsoft did the first business model around Azure. And so when we did that work, there was just a really important element of, okay, can we actually sell you some amount of predictability, visibility, understanding of that in a consumption-based world. And so mixing these two things together, I think will be that it's the next opportunity from a business model perspective. But the good thing is businesses have a deep and profound understanding of their underlying logical units that their businesses run on. And then if you pair that with simulation so that you can get a sense of it, and then third, it'll be paired with these kind of offers and blocks of capacity where you'll see a lot of visibility into that. The one note I'll make on CFOs, one of our fabulous portfolio companies called Clarity, which is out of San Francisco, they built an AI platform a number of years ago. And then they were trying to figure out what scenario to sort of cover. And they decided to do ASC 606, which is, everyone was like, that's not a real company, right? It's too narrow. And it turns out ASC 606 is like how software companies close their books. And CFOs, it's a huge effort. It's a huge pain. It takes a long time. When the quarter ends, you would rather be in business strategy meetings about what to do with those numbers as the finance team versus going through the process that's painful and manual of closing the books. So they agentically close your books in an hour. And it has been absolutely transformative for their customers, both from a cost perspective, which is obvious, but then from a revenue perspective, because I can actually have more agility in what I'm offering customers. And the learning for me on this, and kind of relating it back to your business model question, is they went from ASC 606 into, okay, I have the capability to seamlessly record what's happening on your screen and then customize that into your business function. So those multimodal inputs into an automatic AI model to do whatever business process you're looking at doing. And so it's interesting because we sell to the CFO's office, and we sell them ASC 606 and all these other elements. And those sales cycles are a couple months. Then on this other product where we're like, hey, screen capture with your permission, obviously, record how people do this work, and then we'll agentify it, which doesn't mean we'll take the exact manner in which the human does it and turn it into AI. We'll actually do it in the intelligent way that AI should be doing it. And the sales cycle on that is like 2 weeks, because every CFO and every finance office is just over the moon of, oh my gosh, this is just me making more efficient literally every business process that we do with the outcomes that we custom and uniquely as a business want. And then from a business model perspective, I can rate that based on the number of times that happens and the ability to say, wow, this is, I'm going to do this for 1 contract, for 20 contracts, for 3 POs, for 300 POs, but you have a sense of how large those elements are in your business. So the math gets very simple for them.
Interesting. Just like 1 or 2 more things before we wrap up here, by the way. You've mentioned some of this already, but I would love to hear any tips you have for early stage AI founders on building an AI software business that can scale globally. And then just one thing after that, but let's go with that real quick.
Okay, so tips. Think long term. It's hard because in this model, we talk about a couple years ago and we're like, oh, in AI years, that's way more than dog years, right? Like, but thinking long term about what corners can we look around now in order to think about where our business has staying power. Building for the long run is going to be super important right now, given the amount of change that we're seeing. So you're building for the long run, but with a super flexible platform, right? So, as models trade out, as you're trading a proprietary model for an open source model, our best companies are moving back and forth between models very, very quickly. And that agility is incredibly useful to software companies, right? And trying these new things, integrating some of this multimodal stuff in later in the game as these models get better. It's just that agility is incredibly, it's unique. It's a unique time to be able to do that. And then just, the best people, one amazing engineer, especially that's AI enabled and brings all these elements together, moves so much faster than a team of average. And so it, of course, comes down to who are the people that are bringing this to bear and coming together. But, and then just have fun with it. I mean, honestly, we're living through the most exciting time I can imagine from a tech perspective. And this transition is a time of abundance, right? Like being able to print intelligence, being able to have intelligence everywhere, leaning into that abundance in a real way and looking at what that means for your company. So I can try 50 things. Reinforcement learning got better when we said, hey, try the same experiment 50 times and then take the learnings from that. And being able to do that with these businesses is an incredible gift that AI has given us right now.
Last question. It's around HumanX. What are you looking forward to about this event?
Just the people there. I mean, I'm looking forward to the content. I'm looking forward to this community. I'm looking forward to being able to have these conversations in a super timely way. I think one thing that this conference is doing that's super different is that they're saying, hey, what are the real applications that make businesses work? So I go to the whole gamut, right, of the academic conferences into the very practical. They're going to span across theory and application, and I love that.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the event. I think there's going to be a lot of great people, a lot of good content. I'll be there doing some in-person stuff, which I'm excited about, and look forward to seeing you there.
Can't wait.
Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.